When a rising power challenges a ruling power, history shows a bias toward war, the Thucydides trap. By 2026, the collapsed Phase 1 trade deal left international supply chains fractured, creating a volatile landscape for global capital. The U.S. delegation arrived at Beijing's Great Hall of the People, seeking an entirely different approach. They discarded the pursuit of a traditional diplomatic cure. Their objective was strict containment. They needed a robust framework to ensure that unsolved geopolitical problems wouldn't trigger a systemic failure of the global economy. Both governments abandoned the search for a permanent structural resolution. Instead, they accepted a new, highly regulated reality, a managed equilibrium. This arrangement operates as an explicit, institutionalized containment strategy, proposed directly by Beijing, designed to keep their ongoing competition within predictable boundaries. Those boundaries come with a very specific expiration date. According to the official readout, this constructive stability framework is only guaranteed to guide the bilateral relationship for exactly 3 years. Accepting a temporary, highly regulated rivalry is the most pragmatic lever the world's two largest economies have left to pull. Without it, the risk of a near-term market collapse becomes too high to absorb. The U.S. delegation focused strictly on commercial execution, bringing along some of America's most influential business leaders, including Elon Musk. With figures like Tim Cook and Larry Fink in the room, Washington sent a clear signal that the health of the technology and finance sectors was tethered directly to the outcomes of these negotiations. To enforce those outcomes, the administration announced the creation of a bilateral board of trade. Its strict mandate is to oversee the actual implementation of purchase commitments, fixing the broken promises of the 2020 deal. That board will track concrete deliverables, focused heavily on aerospace and agriculture, specifically targeting large-scale procurement of Boeing aircraft and American soybeans. Treating international diplomacy like a corporate supply chain gives these trade agreements a layer of institutional accountability, replacing vague political promises with measurable quotas. This map isolates the Strait of Hormuz, tracing massive energy flows toward Asia. It highlights a rare point of absolute alignment. Neither Washington nor Beijing wants this choke point militarized. China's manufacturing is dangerously exposed. If interrupted, the industrial engines of Asia lose their primary fuel. An extended blockade in the region would immediately accelerate inflationary pressure, severely hitting commodity-dependent economies and driving up global production costs overnight. When the physical fuel required to run a superpower is at risk, mutual economic vulnerability overrides ideological rivalry. Severe macroeconomic exposure simply forces cooperation. While energy dictates cooperation, the island of Taiwan acts as the primary tripwire that could undo the entire framework. In private bilateral talks, Beijing delivered a remarkably direct warning to the U.S. administration. They stated clearly that mishandling the Taiwan question guarantees clashes and potentially open conflict. To stabilize the markets following that exchange, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio quickly confirmed that current American policies regarding Taiwan remain completely unchanged. By drawing absolute, non-negotiable military boundaries, both nations create a functional firewall. It allows them to aggressively compartmentalize their commercial trade without accidentally stumbling into a kinetic war. If these newly established trade mechanisms hold, the financial ripple effects will immediately hit emerging markets, particularly across Africa and South America. This chart compares China's historical U.S. trade volume against its recent activity. In early 2026, Chinese exports to non-U.S. markets surged by nearly 22%, as Beijing aggressively courted the global south. A stabilized relationship with Washington alters that trajectory. If those large-scale purchase commitments are met, massive Chinese buying power is suddenly redirected away from emerging markets and routed right back into America. Countries like South Africa sit directly in the crosshairs of this shift. Any bilateral agreement between Washington and Beijing on rare earth access directly affects the leverage of South African mining assets. Stabilizing the trade relationship in Beijing inherently disrupts the competitive positioning of commodity exporters around the rest of the globe. Does this framework successfully bypass the Thucydides trap? We are looking at a global architecture defined strictly by corporate enforcement, purchase quotas, and managed competition. It relies entirely on mutual pragmatism rather than diplomatic friendship. This complex, high-stakes equilibrium is only guaranteed to hold for exactly 36 months. The two largest economies have built their containment unit, but they've also started